The glare of flashing bulbs was a weapon, and on the crimson carpet of the Grand Majestic Hotel, CEO Brendan Gallagher wielded it with a predator's smile. On his arm was not his wife of 5 years, but a sultry model draped in diamonds he had paid for. To the ravenous press, he called her his muse, his voice a smug proclamation of infidelity. He was at the apex of his power, ready to toast his success at the Ascendancy Foundation Gala. But he had no idea that his quiet, pregnant wife, watching from the shadows, was about to detonate a secret that would not just end their marriage, but burn his billion-dollar empire to the ground. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's the story of what happens when a man foolishly tries to discard a queen, forgetting she built the entire kingdom. The cavernous penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was a monument to Brendan Gallagher's ego. Its floors were Italian marble, its walls held abstract art he pretended to understand, and its air was thick with the scent of expensive diffusers and unspoken resentment. For Olivia Hayes, it was a beautifully furnished prison. At 5 months pregnant, she had traded her own ambitions for a life cushioned in lambswool throws and deafening silence. Brendan was a man sculpted by success, or rather the appearance of it. He had inherited a solid tech firm, Ascendancy Enterprises, from his father, and through aggressive marketing and ruthless acquisitions had ballooned its public profile. He saw himself as a visionary, a titan of industry. He saw Olivia as a beautiful, suitable accessory who managed his home, planned his dinners, and would in due time produce his heir. He had stopped truly seeing her years ago. This evening was the pinnacle of his year, the annual Ascendancy Foundation Gala. It was his coronation, a televised spectacle where he would announce record profits and a new philanthropic initiative cementing his legacy. He adjusted the knot on his Tom Ford tie in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to Olivia. "Is the driver downstairs?" he asked, not turning. Olivia sat on the edge of their custom-made bed, a simple, elegant, midnight blue maternity gown pooling around her. She had chosen it specifically to not draw too much attention. "He will be in 10 minutes, Brendan. I just confirmed." "Good." He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with a critical, dismissive glance. "Are you sure you're up for this? You look tired. The press can be vultures. It might be better if you stayed home. Rest." The words were coated in a thin veneer of concern, but the meaning was clear. "You in your current state are not fit for my spotlight." The sting was familiar, a dull ache she had learned to live with. "I'm fine, Brendan. A little tired, but I want to be there to support you," she replied, her voice steady. It was a lie. The last place she wanted to be was on display holding his arm while he absorbed the adoration of a city that only knew his curated public persona. "Well, don't overdo it," he said, turning back to the mirror and straightening his lapels. "This is a big night. The new AI integration project is finally paying off. I'll be announcing the Gallagher Grant for future innovators. It's going to be major press." "My AI integration project," she thought, a bitter taste rising in her throat. 3 years ago, Ascendancy was stagnating. Its software was clunky, its innovation non-existent. Brendan was panicking all bluster and no substance. From the quiet of her study, Olivia, a woman he believed spent her days arranging flowers and doing prenatal yoga, had anonymously authored a white paper under the pseudonym The Architect. It outlined a revolutionary framework for machine learning integration in corporate logistics. She had sent it to a low-level R&D executive at Ascendancy, knowing it would be too brilliant to ignore. It had worked its way up the chain until it landed on Brendan's desk. He'd presented it as his own epiphany, pouring company resources into its development. He never once questioned the origin of the anonymous genius who had saved his company. He simply absorbed the credit as he always did. "That sounds wonderful," she said the words, feeling like ash in her mouth. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He snatched it up, a sly smile touching his lips as he read the screen. He tapped out a quick reply, his thumb moving with practiced ease. "That's my cue. I'll head down first. Need to brief the PR team. Don't be late." He walked out of the room without a backward glance, the scent of his cologne, a sharp, arrogant fragrance called Invictus, lingering in the air. Left alone in the echoing silence, Olivia closed her eyes. The baby gave a gentle kick, a small, private reassurance. For months she had been wrestling with her conscience. She had married Brendan, believing in the charming, ambitious man he had once been. But the more successful he became on the back of her intellect, the more he had transformed into this hollow, narcissistic stranger. The discovery of his affair 6 months ago had been the final brutal cut. She had found the receipts first, a Cartier bracelet she never received, dinners at Daniel she never attended, then the texts from Sienna Jensen, a vapid social media influencer whose entire brand was built on flaunting a life she didn't pay for. The texts were cloying and crude, detailing trysts in hotels and praising Brendan for his power. Olivia hadn't confronted him. A screaming match would accomplish nothing. He would lie, gaslight her, and call her hysterical. No, a man like Brendan didn't understand emotion. He understood only one thing: consequences. She stood up and walked not to her jewelry box but to a small, unassuming laptop on her desk. It was a ghost machine, untraceable and encrypted beyond military standards. She typed in a password, a long string of alphanumeric code that was the name of the small, forgotten town where she'd grown up, a place Brendan had once mockingly called the middle of nowhere. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex interface of market data, encrypted communications and legal documents. For 5 years, she had lived a double life. She wasn't just Olivia Hayes, the CEO's quiet wife. She was the architect, a legendary anonymous figure in the tech and finance world. Through a labyrinth of shell corporations and blind trusts managed by a fiercely loyal attorney, she had parlayed an inheritance from her brilliant engineer grandfather into a staggering fortune. She had invested in dozens of startups, patented revolutionary code, and quietly acquired a controlling interest in companies across the globe, including a 58% majority stake in Ascendancy Enterprises. Brendan had no idea. He thought her family money was a modest trust fund she used for charity donations. He had no clue that the powerful, mysterious holding company, Phoenix Holdings, that had been steadily buying up his company's stock over the past 2 years, was her. She looked at the live feed of the red carpet on her screen. Brendan would be arriving any minute. Her plan was in motion. It was a terrifying, audacious gambit that would either save her or destroy everything. She placed a hand on her belly. "It's for us," she whispered to her unborn child. "No one will ever make you feel small. I promise." She picked up her phone and made a call. "David," she said, her voice devoid of any of the hesitance she showed her husband. It was cold, clear, and sharp as forged steel. "Are you in position?" "On standby." "Olivia," came the calm voice of David Chen, her lawyer and confidant. "The board members have received the preliminary injunctions. They just don't know who filed them yet. The market is primed. All we need is the public catalyst." Olivia took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the screen as a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb of the Grand Majestic Hotel. "Don't worry," she said, a chilling certainty in her tone. "My husband is about to provide it." The red carpet was a river of light and sound. Hundreds of cameras flashed in a relentless, blinding strobe, capturing every sequin and smile. Jessica Riley, a veteran journalist for the New York Financial Times, stood just behind the velvet rope, her expression one of bored cynicism. She'd covered dozens of these galas. They were all the same self-congratulatory spectacles for men who measured their worth in stock points. Brendan Gallagher was a prime example, all Polish and no substance. She'd always suspected there was something brittle behind his perfect smile. A roar went through the press pit. Brendan's limousine had arrived, but the door was opened not for his pregnant wife, but for Sienna Jensen. She emerged like a champagne flute, brought to life, tall, slender, and shimmering, in a silver dress that was less a piece of clothing and more a suggestion. She clung to Brendan's arm, her smile wide and practiced for the cameras. Jessica's journalistic instincts fired up. This wasn't just a CEO arriving at a party. This was a statement, a public, calculated humiliation of his wife. Brendan beamed, soaking in the attention. He leaned into a microphone, thrust at him by a reporter from a celebrity gossip outlet. "Brendan, you look incredible. Everyone was expecting to see Olivia tonight. Where is she?" Brendan's smile tightened for a fraction of a second before his media training kicked in. He chuckled, a dismissive, condescending sound. "Olivia is resting at home. You know how it is. We decided it was best for her to have a quiet night. But I couldn't face this evening alone." He squeezed Sienna's hand, pulling her closer. "I'm thrilled to have the incredibly talented and beautiful Sienna Jensen with me tonight. She's been a great friend, and a true muse for the creative spirit we foster at Ascendancy." Sienna preened. "Brendan is just the most inspiring man I've ever met." She cooed, her voice pitched for maximum effect. "His vision is everything." Jessica Riley scribbled furiously in her notepad. "Muse creative spirit." This was a declaration of war, broadcast live. She saw Brendan's CFO, a perpetually nervous man named Robert Miller, step out of the car behind them, his face pale and strained. He avoided the cameras scurrying inside, like a man late for his own execution. Inside the grand ballroom, the elite of New York's business world mingled under colossal crystal chandeliers. Brendan made his way through the room with Sienna on his arm, a conquering hero returning from battle. He accepted handshakes and pats on the back, his ego swelling with every compliment. He felt invincible. He had his company, his legacy, and now the beautiful woman he felt he deserved all on public display. He glanced at his watch. Time for the main event. He took the stage, the room falling into a respectful hush. A massive screen behind him displayed the Ascendancy Enterprises logo. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice booming with practiced confidence. "This has been a banner year for Ascendancy. A year of innovation, of growth, of vision." He launched into his speech a carefully crafted narrative of his own genius. He talked about the instinct that led him to the new AI integration, the bold risks he took. He never mentioned the anonymous white paper. He never mentioned the team of engineers who had worked around the clock. It was all me, my success. He declared pausing for dramatic effect is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who push you to be better. People who aren't afraid of the spotlight. The jab at Olivia was unmistakable to anyone who knew her quiet nature. And that is why I am so proud to announce the Gallagher Grant for Future Innovators, a $50 million fund to support young minds who will shape our future. Polite applause rippled through the room. Brendan's smile widened as he prepared for his closing remarks. This was his moment of ultimate triumph. And then it began. The first sign was a flicker on the large screen behind him. The Ascendancy logo wavered, then pixelated into a glitchy mess before going completely black. Brendan faltered for a second, annoyed. "A small technical difficulty, it seems," he said, trying to laugh it off. Then a collective gasp went through the audience. Phones which had been respectfully put away were now being pulled out, buzzing and vibrating with frantic urgency. A prominent hedge fund manager in the front row, Arthur Vance, stared at his phone, his face turning ashen. He stood up abruptly and walked out, speaking in hushed, urgent tones into his device. Another followed, then two more. Brendan's confidence began to crack. As I was saying, his CFO, Robert Miller, was now at the side of the stage, frantically trying to get his attention, his face slick with sweat. He was mouthing something Brendan couldn't understand over the growing murmur in the crowd. "What is it, Robert?" Brendan hissed into the microphone, forgetting it was live. Jessica Riley, near the back, was already on her phone, checking the stock market wire. Her eyes widened. "My God," she whispered. Ascendancy Enterprises AIN stock was plummeting. Not falling, but free-falling, as if it had been pushed off a cliff. A flash alert had just been issued by a top financial watchdog announcing a surprise emergency audit of AEN's third-quarter profits, citing credible allegations of shareholder fraud and asset misrepresentation. Simultaneously, a devastating story had just broken on a major financial news site, leaked internal documents showing that Brendan had used company funds to purchase millions of dollars in personal gifts, including a condo and several cars for Sienna Jensen. The room was descending into chaos. The carefully constructed facade of the evening was shattering in real time. Sienna, still standing on the stage, looked utterly bewildered. Her smile had been replaced by a mask of confused panic. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. She was supposed to be crowned the new Queen of New York society, not stand on the deck of a sinking ship. Brendan stared out at the sea of panicked faces, his speech forgotten. His world, so solid just moments before, was dissolving around him. He looked wildly at his CFO. "Robert, what the hell is happening?" Robert Miller could only shake his head, holding up his own phone, which displayed the tanking stock price. "We're being liquidated, Brendan," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Someone is triggering a margin call on a massive scale. It's Phoenix Holdings. They're calling in all their convertible debt. We don't have the capital to cover it. We're finished." Brendan felt the blood drain from his face. Phoenix Holdings, the silent, aggressive investor who owned over half his company. He had never met them. No one had. They were a ghost, a myth. And in that moment, as the grand edifice of his life crumbled around him, the main doors of the ballroom swung open with silent, deliberate force. A hush fell over the panicked crowd. All heads turned. Framed in the doorway, bathed in the light from the hall, stood Olivia Hayes. She did not look like the woman who had sat on the bed looking tired an hour earlier. The simple maternity gown was gone. In its place was a bespoke power suit of ivory wool, tailored perfectly to accommodate her pregnancy. Her hair, usually in a soft bun, was styled in sleek, severe lines. Her face, free of the pained resignation it so often held, was a mask of cold, implacable resolve. Her eyes, which Brendan had so often overlooked, now burned with an intensity that seemed to suck the very air from the room. She was not alone. Flanking her was her lawyer, David Chen, his expression grim and professional. Behind them stood two men and a woman in dark suits, their presence radiating a quiet but absolute authority. They were her personal security and executive team. The reporters, smelling the biggest story of the year, broke from the chaos and swarmed towards her, a frantic mob of microphones and cameras. "Mrs. Gallagher, what's your reaction to the allegations against your husband? Olivia, were you aware of the affair? What do you know about the stock crash? She ignored them all. Her gaze was locked on the stage on the man who was staring at her, as if he'd seen a ghost. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, the crowd parting before her, as if by an invisible force. The only sound was the clicking of cameras and the soft, steady rhythm of her heels on the marble floor. On stage, Brendan was paralyzed. This was not the Olivia he knew. This was a stranger, an interloper who wore his wife's face. His mind struggled to process what was happening. The stock, the audit, the affair being leaked. And now this. It was a coordinated attack. Sienna Jensen, seeing her meal ticket imploding, took a hesitant step back from Brendan, trying to physically distance herself from the unfolding disaster. Her influencer's brain was already calculating the damage control posts. Olivia reached the foot of the stage and stopped. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her quiet presence commanded more attention than Brendan's shouting ever had. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Get off my stage, Brendan," she said. Her voice was quiet, yet it carried across the silent ballroom, amplified by a dozen news microphones. Brendan blinked, bewildered. "Olivia, what are you doing? You need to leave. This is a private, corporate matter." A humorless smile touched Olivia's lips. "It is indeed a corporate matter," she agreed. "Which is why you, as a now former employee, are trespassing on company property during a shareholder action." She turned her gaze to the panicked CFO. "Mr. Miller, you can stand down. Your services will no longer be required." Robert Miller looked between Brendan and Olivia, his face a mess of confusion and fear. He simply nodded and scurried off the stage, disappearing into the crowd. Brendan was aghast. "Former employee, what are you talking about? Are you insane?" He stammered, his voice cracking. "Security, get her out of here." The hotel security guards took a step forward, then stopped, looking uncertainly at Olivia's own formidable team. David Chen stepped forward, holding a sleek tablet. "That won't be necessary," he said in a loud, clear voice. "Pursuant to Article 7, Section 3 of the Ascendancy Enterprises Corporate Bylaws, a majority shareholder can call an emergency session to vote on the immediate removal of a CEO and acting board for gross fiduciary negligence. The vote was just held electronically among the primary shareholders. It was unanimous." He turned the tablet screen to face the crowd. On it was an official document already filed with the SEC. Brendan stared his mind, refusing to accept what he was seeing. "Majority shareholder, that's Phoenix Holdings. That's not you. You don't have 2 cents to rub together that I didn't give you." This was the moment, the culmination of years of silence, of being underestimated, of being invisible. Olivia walked up the small set of stairs onto the stage, her movements unhurried. She walked past Sienna, giving her a look of such profound pity that the model visibly flinched and scurried away, a fallen idol seeking anonymity in the chaos. She finally stood before her husband, the man she had once loved, the man who had become her jailer. "You're right, Brendan," she said, her voice still unnervingly calm. "Olivia Hayes doesn't own this company." She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting every eye in the room, every camera lens, every person watching live at home hang on her next words. "But I do." She took the microphone from the podium. "My name is Olivia Hayes. But for the past 10 years in the financial world, I have been known by another name. I am the architect, and I am the founder-owner and sole director of Phoenix Holdings." A collective audible gasp swept through the ballroom. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. The name The Architect was legendary, a ghost in the machine of global finance, a figure credited with visionary investments and market-shaping moves, yet whose identity had remained the most fiercely guarded secret on Wall Street. To the titans of industry in that room, the architect was a godlike entity, a force of nature. And that force was standing on stage in the form of Brendan Gallagher's pregnant, unassuming wife. Jessica Riley felt a jolt of adrenaline so pure it was like an electric shock. This wasn't just a corporate takeover or a marital spat. This was a myth becoming flesh. Her fingers flew across the screen of her phone, sending a one-line bulletin to her editor. Olivia Hayes is the architect. Gallagher out. Full story to follow. It was the scoop of a lifetime. Brendan's face went through a rapid series of transformations from disbelief to confusion, then to a dawning, sickening horror. His mind reeled frantically, trying to connect the dots. The anonymous white paper that had saved his company. Olivia's late nights in her study he'd dismissed as online shopping. The modest trust fund he'd never bothered to look into. It all coalesced into a truth so monumental it physically staggered him. He stumbled back a step, his hand gripping the podium for support. No. He whispered the single word, a pathetic denial against an overwhelming reality. No, you're lying. This is a joke. A joke. Olivia's voice, amplified by the microphone, was laced with ice. Was it a joke when you stood on this stage and took credit for the AI integration framework I designed? Was it a joke when you used shareholder funds to purchase a $2 million condominium on Park Avenue for your muse? David Chen, on cue, swiped the screen on his tablet. The main screen behind Olivia, which had been black, flickered to life. It didn't show the Ascendancy logo. It showed a crystal-clear copy of a deed of sale for a luxury condo. Buyer Ascendancy Enterprises. Occupant Sienna Jensen. The crowd murmured, the sound growing into a low roar of condemnation. Sienna, who had been trying to slink out a side door, was suddenly illuminated by a dozen camera flashes, her face a portrait of guilt and terror. She was trapped. Was it a joke? Olivia continued, her voice relentless. When you leveraged company assets to secure personal loans for speculative ventures that all failed, hiding the losses in a subsidiary account in the Cayman Islands, the screen changed again. This time, it showed a complex web of offshore bank transfers, a damning flowchart of corporate malfeasance. The details were so specific, so irrefutable that no one could doubt their authenticity. Brendan stared at the screen, his mouth agape. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor. He was looking at the complete deconstruction of his life broadcast live to the world. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his own cleverness, that he never imagined anyone could unravel his secrets, least of all the woman he shared a bed with. These are lies. Fabrications. He finally managed to roar, his voice raspy with panic. She's a vindictive, scorned woman. You can't believe her. Olivia didn't even flinch. You are correct on one point, Brendan. I am a scorned woman. But a scorned woman with a controlling interest in this company, a team of the best forensic accountants in the country, and a direct line to the SEC's enforcement division, who received a full copy of this data packet exactly 30 minutes ago. That was the final nail in the coffin. The mention of the Securities and Exchange Commission sent a fresh wave of panic through the board members still in the room. This wasn't just a corporate coup. It was a federal case. Their association with Brendan had just become radioactive. As of this moment, Olivia announced, her voice resonating with absolute power, Ascendancy Enterprises is under new leadership. The entire board is dissolved pending a shareholder review. Mr. Gallagher is terminated effective immediately for cause. His assets held within the company are frozen to cover the financial damages incurred by his extracurricular activities. She finally turned to look directly at him, her eyes holding no hatred, no anger, only a vast, chilling emptiness. It was the look one gives to something that has ceased to matter. You built your kingdom on my work, Brendan. You decorated it with my money, and you flaunted your betrayal in my face. You thought I was just a part of the architecture. You never realized I was the architect. Brendan finally broke. The carefully constructed artifice of the powerful CEO shattered, revealing the weak, terrified man beneath. "Olivia, please," he begged, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "We can talk about this. At home. Don't do this." It was the plea of a man who still even now didn't understand. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought home was still a place he had a right to be. "There is no home for us anymore," she said, her voice softening with a finality that was more brutal than any shout. "And David has already filed the divorce papers. They cite adultery with irrefutable proof. I believe the press will find them very illuminating." She turned to her security chief. "Please escort Mr. Gallagher from the premises. He is no longer welcome here." Two of her guards moved forward. Brendan, looking utterly broken, offered no resistance. As they led him off the stage, past the shocked faces of his former colleagues and the merciless glare of the cameras, his eyes met Olivia's one last time. In them she saw not remorse, but a flicker of pure, uncomprehending hatred. He had been toppled, and he would never understand why. As the disgraced CEO was escorted out of his own party, Olivia Hayes stood alone on the stage, a silent, powerful figure against the backdrop of his ruin. She placed a protective hand over her belly. The first battle was won. Now the war to rebuild her company and her life was about to begin. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom. The gala devolved into a chaotic exodus as guests, board members, and investors scrambled for the exits, their lawyers already on speed dial. The only people who remained were the press, who swarmed the stage like sharks in a feeding frenzy. Olivia didn't give them the sound bites they craved. She held up a hand for silence, a gesture that was immediately obeyed. "A full press conference will be held tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the Ascendancy Enterprises headquarters." She stated, her voice calm and authoritative. "At that time, I will introduce the interim management team and outline our plan for the future. We will be fully transparent and will cooperate with all regulatory bodies. Thank you." With that, she turned and, flanked by her team, walked off the stage and toward a private exit, leaving the ravenous media with nothing but the smouldering wreckage of Brendan Gallagher's career to report on. The story exploded across the internet. Architect Isa Woman and Gallagher Galagate were trending worldwide within the hour. News outlets scrapped their scheduled programming for special reports. Jessica Riley's article for the Financial Times went viral, a masterclass in journalism that not only reported the facts, but also captured the Shakespearean drama of the evening. For Brendan, the humiliation was absolute and instantaneous. As he was unceremoniously deposited onto the sidewalk outside the Grand Majestic Service entrance, his phone began to melt down with calls he couldn't possibly answer. His bank, his lawyers, his so-called friends, all calling to sever ties. He looked up at the glittering skyscraper that housed his penthouse, a home he now realized he couldn't enter. The locks were likely already being changed. Stripped of his company, his wife, and his dignity in one fell swoop, he was a king who had become a beggar in the space of 30 minutes. He hailed a cab, a man adrift in a city that had once been his kingdom. Sienna Jensen's reckoning was just as swift, though it played out in the currency of her world social media. Her Instagram and TikTok were flooded with a tidal wave of revulsion. She was branded a homewrecker, a gold digger, a fool. Sponsorship deals vanished in a flood of effective immediately emails from panicked brands. The Cartier bracelet, the designer clothes, the lavish lifestyle it all evaporated, revealed as nothing more than a cheap rental. By sunrise, she had deleted her accounts, her digital existence wiped clean by public scorn. The next morning, Ascendancy Enterprises headquarters was besieged by news vans. Inside the atmosphere was one of shell-shocked anxiety. Employees whispered in hushed tones, unsure if they still had jobs. At precisely 10 a.m., Olivia walked into the main press hall. She was dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue dress. She exuded an aura of calm competence that immediately began to soothe the frayed nerves of her employees and the market. She did not mention Brendan by name. She did not dwell on the scandal. She was all business. "Good morning," she began. "Yesterday, Ascendancy Enterprises underwent a necessary and decisive leadership transition. Our company was built on a foundation of innovation, and we are going to return to that core principle." She introduced her interim C-suite, a team of highly respected, no-nonsense industry veterans she had cultivated relationships with over the years as the architect. They were legends in their fields, people Brendan could never have attracted. Their presence alone sent a powerful signal to Wall Street. "Our first order of business is transparency," Olivia continued. "We have initiated a full independent audit of the company's financials. Any and all discrepancies will be rectified. To our shareholders, I am one of you. My priority is to stabilize the company and restore its value and integrity. To our employees, your work is the true engine of this company. Your jobs are secure. The era of vanity projects and wasteful expenditure is over. From today, we are a company focused on product performance and people." The market responded instantly. After an initial catastrophic drop, AEN stock began to stabilize, then slowly, miraculously began to climb. Investors were terrified of a lying CEO, but they were thrilled by the prospect of the legendary architect taking the helm. Olivia's calm, decisive action had pulled the company back from the brink. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Brendan's deceit was uncovered. He had been cooking the books for years, inflating profits to boost his own bonuses, and funneling money into vanity projects designed to make him look good. The Gallagher grant he'd announced at the gala was a sham. No funds had ever actually been allocated. He had built a house of cards, and Olivia had simply refused to be the foundation anymore. Brendan, facing a slew of federal charges and shareholder lawsuits, was forced to hire a public defender. His assets were frozen, his powerful friends had abandoned him, and he became a pariah. The tabloids hounded him, publishing unflattering photos of him looking disheveled and broken. Olivia never spoke of him publicly again. She was focused on the future. She moved out of the sterile penthouse and into a warm, light-filled brownstone in a quieter neighborhood. She began designing a nursery, filling it not with expensive designer furniture, but with books and toys that sparked imagination. She worked with a ruthless efficiency, cutting away the rot within Ascendancy. She streamlined departments, promoted talented women who Brendan had overlooked, and refocused the company's R&D on genuinely innovative projects. She was a natural leader, not through bluster and intimidation, but through intelligence, clarity, and a quiet strength that inspired loyalty. The employees who had lived in fear of Brendan's volatile moods now worked with a renewed sense of purpose. They were proud to work for the architect. 4 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Sophia, meaning wisdom. Sitting in the quiet of her private hospital room, looking down at the tiny, perfect face of her daughter, Olivia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. All the chaos, the betrayal, the public spectacle, it had all led to this quiet, profound moment. She had not just reclaimed her company. She had reclaimed her life, her name, and her future for both herself and her child. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a text from David Chen. He took the plea bargain. 10 years minimum security. He served 7 with good behavior. He gave up everything. It's over. Olivia read the message and felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, not even satisfaction. Brendan Gallagher was a chapter of her life that was now closed, a ghost from a past that no longer had any power over her. His punishment was not her concern. Her focus was on the small, warm bundle in her arms. A week later, she was back at work, but on her own terms. The corner office was redesigned. Half of it was a sleek, functional workspace. The other half was a beautiful, soft-carpeted nursery, complete with a crib and a mobile of swirling planets. Sophia was a constant gurgling presence in board meetings held by her mother or a trusted nanny. This simple act sent a more powerful message than any press release. Olivia was not hiding her motherhood. She was integrating it into her power. She was showing every woman in her company that they didn't have to choose between a family and a career. It was a cultural shift that resonated deeply, fostering a new kind of loyalty and respect within the company walls. One afternoon, Jessica Riley, the journalist who had broken the story, was granted an exclusive interview the first Olivia had given since the takeover. They met not in a boardroom, but on a bench in Central Park, watching Sophia sleep in her stroller. "Everyone wants to know," Jessica began. "Was it always your plan to take over? Or did he just push you too far?" Olivia watched a leaf drift down from a maple tree before answering. "I never wanted to run Ascendancy. My work as the architect was always about building things, creating new technologies. I enjoyed the anonymity. I acquired the majority stake as an insurance policy, a way to protect the company and the employees if Brendan's recklessness ever went too far." "And the gala?" Jessica pressed gently. "That was the final straw." Olivia nodded, a sad, distant look in her eyes. "When he stood on that stage and prepared to humiliate me publicly and deliberately while I was carrying his child. It wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about his character. He was willing to sacrifice his wife and his unborn child for a moment of public ego-stroking with his mistress. A man like that cannot be trusted with a paper route, let alone a multi-billion-dollar company. It was no longer about protecting the company from his incompetence. It was about protecting my child from his influence." She looked at Jessica, her gaze clear and direct. "This wasn't an act of revenge. Revenge is about the past. This was an act of preservation. It was about the future. My daughter will grow up knowing that her mother did not stand by and allow a man to diminish her. She will inherit a legacy, not of wealth but of strength. She will know that her value is not determined by any man, but by the power of her own mind and the courage in her own heart." Jessica lowered her recorder, profoundly moved. She had come expecting a story about a corporate titan's downfall. She had found a much more powerful story, one about a mother's rise. 2 years flew by. Under Olivia's leadership, Ascendancy Enterprises, rebranded simply as Ascendancy, was more successful than ever before. It was lauded not just for its record-breaking profits, but for its ethical business practices, its groundbreaking parental leave policies, and its commitment to genuine innovation. Olivia Hayes, once known only as a CEO's wife, was now one of the most respected and influential business leaders in the world. She was a regular on the covers of Forbes and Wired, not for her wealth, but for her vision. She never remarried. Her life was full with her daughter, her work, and a close circle of trusted friends. The penthouse she had once shared with Brendan was sold, its proceeds donated to a network of shelters for women escaping abusive relationships. She had cleansed her life of his influence completely. One crisp spring morning, Olivia was pushing Sophia on a swing in a park near their brownstone. Sophia, now a chattering toddler with her mother's bright, intelligent eyes, giggled with delight as she flew higher and higher. Olivia's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced at it. It was a small, insignificant item from a local paper, in a town she'd never heard of. Brendan Gallagher, former tech CEO, released early on parole takes job as assistant manager at a regional electronics store. A picture accompanied the article. It showed a man who was almost unrecognizable. His hair was thinning, his shoulders were slumped, and the arrogant fire in his eyes had been replaced by a dull, hollowed-out emptiness. He was a ghost of the man he once was haunted by the empire he had lost. Olivia looked at the photo for a long moment, then locked her phone and put it away. She felt a faint, fleeting sense of pity, not for the man himself, but for the wasted potential, the life he could have had, if not for his own blinding arrogance. "Higher, Mummy, higher!" Sophia squealed. Olivia smiled, the past dissolving like smoke. She pushed the swing, sending her daughter soaring up into the bright, limitless sky. The future was here, right in front of her, full of laughter and light. Brendan was a footnote in a book she was no longer reading. She was the author of her own story now, and it was a masterpiece. She was Olivia Hayes. She was a mother. She was a creator. She was, and always would be, the architect. 7 years had passed since the night of the gala. To the world, Brendan Gallagher was a forgotten headline, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. For Olivia Hayes, he was less than a memory. He was a void, a space once occupied by pain that had long since been filled with life-love and the ceaseless forward momentum of building a better world. Ascendancy was now a global leader in ethical AI, a beacon of innovation and corporate responsibility. And Sophia, at 9 years old, was the bright, vibrant center of Olivia's universe. She had her mother's sharp intellect and a boundless curiosity that Olivia nurtured with unwavering devotion. Their life was one of comfortable earned normalcy. Despite her immense wealth, Olivia insisted on doing the simple things. It was one such Saturday afternoon that led them to a sprawling Tech World superstore in a suburban mall. Sophia needed a new, more advanced tablet for a coding class she was taking. The store was a cacophony of bright lights, competing electronic jingles, and the low hum of 1,000 screens. As Sophia excitedly examined the display models, Olivia stood back watching with a gentle smile. She was no longer the architect in these moments. She was just Mom. "Excuse me, can I help you find anything?" The voice was thin, reedy, and bore the practiced weary tone of 1,000 retail shifts. Olivia turned a polite refusal on her lips and froze. The man before her wore an ill-fitting blue polo shirt with the Tech World logo stitched over the pocket. His name tag read, Brendan. His shoulders were slumped, the confident posture of the CEO, long gone, replaced by the defeated hunch of a man who spent his days on his feet. His hair was more grey than brown, and the skin around his eyes was etched with lines of a deep, settled weariness. But the eyes were the same. And right now they were wide with a state of shock so profound it looked like he might collapse. Time seemed to warp and bend in aisle 7. For a dizzying second, Olivia was back in the penthouse, watching him walk out. She was in the car, watching the live feed of his betrayal. The echo of the pain was real, but it was distant, like a storm happening in another country. It had no power over her here. "Brendan," she said. Her voice was not angry, not cold, just neutral, an acknowledgement of a face she once knew. He flinched at the sound of his name from her lips. "Olivia." He rasped his throat, suddenly dry. He glanced around frantically, as if expecting her security team to appear. But it was just her and the small dark-haired girl now looking up at him curiously. "Mommy, who is this?" Sophia asked, her voice clear as a bell. Brendan's gaze fell on Sophia, and whatever composure he was struggling to maintain shattered. This was the child, the one whose existence he had so callously disregarded. He saw Olivia's intelligence in her bright, inquisitive eyes, and he felt a chasm of regret so vast it threatened to swallow him whole. "This is an old acquaintance of mine, sweetie," Olivia said calmly, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. She turned her attention back to Brendan, her expression unreadable. "You work here?" It was a statement, not a question. He could only nod shame, burning his cheeks. "For a couple of years now. Assistant manager," he mumbled, as if the title could lend him some shred of dignity. "Olivia, I'm sorry." The words tumbled out clumsy, and inadequate words he had rehearsed 1,000 times in the silence of his small apartment. "For everything. What I did. It was monstrous. I was a fool. I was nothing without you, and I was too arrogant to see it. I'm so sorry." His apology hung in the air, raw and pathetic, amidst the cheerful beeps of the electronics. Olivia listened, her head tilted slightly. She wasn't hearing the plea of the man who had destroyed their marriage. She was hearing the confession of a broken stranger. The anger she had once felt had long since been processed, dismantled, and discarded. It had no place in her life now. "I know," she said simply. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement of fact. He had done those things. He was sorry. The two were not mutually dependent. "I hope you have found a way to live with it." His face fell. He had hoped for. He didn't know what. Absolution, a flicker of the old connection. Her quiet, clinical acceptance was more devastating than any rage could have been. "I'm trying," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I think about you. And..." He glanced at Sophia again. "I think about what I lost every single day." Olivia gave a small, sad nod. "What you threw away, Brendan. There's a difference." She picked up the tablet Sophia had chosen. "We'll be taking this one." She walked toward the checkout counter, Sophia holding her hand. Brendan remained rooted to the spot, a ghost in his own life, watching the vibrant future he had forfeited walk away from him. He watched Olivia swipe her card, a simple black credit card that could have bought the entire store, the entire mall, with the same ease as any other suburban mother. He watched her laugh at something. Sophia said, her face illuminated by a genuine joy he had never been able to give her. As they walked toward the automatic doors, Sophia glanced back at him, one last time, her expression one of childish curiosity for the sad man who had made her mother pause. Then the doors slid open, and they were gone, swallowed by the bright afternoon sun. Brendan stood in the sterile fluorescent light of aisle 7, the echo of their presence fading. He was left with nothing but the hum of the machines and the crushing absolute finality of what he had become a footnote in the epic story of the woman he had failed to see. And there you have it, a story that proves that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Olivia's journey wasn't just about exposing a cheating husband. It was about unleashing the brilliant woman who had been hiding in plain sight all along. She didn't just take back her company. She took back her narrative, her power, and her future, building a new legacy on the ashes of betrayal. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the noise you make, but about the foundations you build and the courage you have to protect them. If you were inspired by Olivia's incredible story of strength and justice, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of truth and triumph. What did you think of Brendan's epic downfall? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, remember your worth and never let anyone underestimate you.